Have you ever wondered if there are terrifying secrets hiding right inside the company you trust the most? And what would happen when the founder, standing at the very peak of his success, suddenly realizes it is the very people he once trusted who are pushing his life's work to the brink of collapse? Jack Miller, a wealthy CEO, had always believed that his company was the very symbol of success. But when an avalanche of complaints came flooding in, he faced two choices: either turn a blind eye or step into the shadows himself to uncover the truth. And Jack chose the path no one else dared to take, disguising himself as an ordinary customer, slipping quietly into every corner of his own company. But he never imagined that what he was about to uncover wasn't just negligence, but a deep-rooted web of betrayal, far more sinister than he could have ever expected. Stay with us until the very end of this video, because you'll witness the moment when those who thought they were safest are dragged into the light, exposed before the entire company. And you'll understand why. Sometimes it's the things we don't see that hold the greatest power to destroy. What would you do if, one day, you discovered that the very people you trusted the most were the ones silently pushing your life's work to the brink of collapse? Jack Miller, the founder and owner of a famous pet store chain, had always believed he knew his company better than anyone else. With nothing but bare hands and determination, he had built a small store into a thriving chain of 7 bustling locations, beloved by pet lovers across the city. But on that fateful morning, seated in his sleek office, surrounded by glass walls, thick reports and soaring revenue figures could no longer mask the growing unease gnawing at him from within. The complaints were piling up relentlessly. Rude staff, stores in disarray, animals left unattended and neglected. These weren't just cold, lifeless words on a page. To the man who had poured his heart and soul into building this brand, they felt like invisible blades slicing through his chest. "Jack, I think we should send the regional manager to check things out," his assistant Ben cautiously suggested, a hint of worry in his voice as he placed the thick stack of complaints on Jack's desk. Jack didn't respond right away. His eyes were locked on the bitter words scrawled across the papers, as if he could pierce through them to the harsh reality beneath. Then he looked up, his voice low but resolute. "No, Ben, I want to see it for myself." Beneath those few words surged a silent but powerful storm. Jack knew no report could ever be truthful enough, no second-hand account vivid enough, as seeing it with his own eyes. If he was going to save his company, he had to confront the root of the problem head-on. No need for expensive suits or the commanding presence of a powerful CEO. Jack chose to transform himself into an ordinary customer, throwing on a simple jacket, letting his silver-streaked hair and worn glasses complete the disguise. He would walk into his own stores as a stranger, and no one would suspect a thing. In that very moment, as he prepared to step out of his comfort zone and plunge into the shadows of his own empire, Jack Miller made a silent vow to himself. "I built this company from nothing. I will not let it crumble at the hands of those who've forgotten the values I created. Never. The journey begins here, and no one, not even Jack himself, could have foreseen the horrifying truth waiting just beyond the horizon." The old, worn-out car came to a stop in front of the first store on Jack's inspection list. Outside, the faded sign swayed weakly under the harsh sunlight, with several bulbs burned out and left unreplaced. Jack drew a deep breath, tasting the heavy air of responsibility and challenge that awaited him. But what he didn't know was that behind this seemingly ordinary door lay a series of dark secrets, waiting to be exposed. The moment he stepped inside, a chill ran down his spine. The stale, musty odor mingled with pet food lingered in the air. The floors were caked with dust, and the shelves stood bare, as if someone had deliberately abandoned them. The scene was a complete betrayal of the brand Jack had once envisioned with all his heart. In a shadowy corner, a worried-looking woman stood before a hamster cage, tapping anxiously on the glass. The disappointment in her eyes was something Jack simply could not ignore. "What seems to be the problem, ma'am?" Jack asked, his voice low but filled with concern. The woman let out a tired sigh. "I've been standing here for over 10 minutes, and no one has even noticed." The water bottle for this poor hamster is completely dry. Look, it's desperately licking the empty nozzle. Jack glanced down, his throat tightening. The tiny hamster was frantically trying to find even a drop of water to survive. This wasn't just negligence, it was cruel abandonment. "I'll find someone to help right away," he replied, struggling to keep his voice calm while fury roared inside him. He strode quickly to the checkout counter, where Tina and Mike were laughing as if nothing around them mattered. Tina's eyes were glued to her phone, while Mike leaned lazily against the counter, his posture disturbingly indifferent. "Excuse me," Jack said firmly. "There's a customer needing help in the hamster section. Their water bottle is bone dry." Tina didn't bother to look up, replying with a dull tone. "We'll take care of it." Jack frowned, emphasizing more strongly. "It's been empty for a long time. Animals can't be left in that condition." Mike scoffed, letting out a cold, mocking laugh. "If she's so worried, why doesn't she just buy a new water bottle herself?" Those words hit Jack like a bucket of ice water poured straight into his chest. But he held himself back, even though every fiber of his being screamed to explode. He needed to see more, to witness just how deep this rot had truly spread. At that moment, Emily, a young woman with her hair neatly tied back, appeared, like a small beam of light piercing through the gloom. With sincerity in her eyes and urgency in her tone, she said, "I'll take care of it right away." Emily rushed off toward the hamster enclosure while Jack watched in silence. But he didn't leave. A strange instinct told him that beneath this frightening indifference, darker secrets were still waiting to be uncovered. The worst was yet to come, and Jack knew. The door he had just walked through wasn't merely the entrance to a failing store. It was the gateway to a truth far more terrifying than he had ever dared to imagine. After Emily quickly addressed the desperate hamster's empty water bottle, Jack still didn't leave. His instincts, sharpened by years of navigating the cutthroat business world, warned him that what he had just witnessed was merely the tip of the iceberg. He decided to pretend to browse the store, casually picking up a few random items like an ordinary customer. But inside, every sense was strung tight as a bowstring. As Jack approached the checkout counter, a whispered yet unmistakably mocking conversation between Tina and Mike reached his ears. They sneered at each other as if this store were their personal stage for cruel jokes. "Did you see that old man?" Tina sneered, her eyes glinting with a mix of contempt and amusement. "Yeah," Mike scoffed, his expression twisted in disdain. "Worrying way too much about those stupid hamsters. If he cares so much, he should just open his own pet store." Tina let out a snide laugh, shaking her head mockingly. "Or better yet, become a CEO? Couldn't possibly do worse than our idiot Jack Miller, sitting pretty in his fancy office, counting his cash while we're the ones sweating it out here." Her words cut through Jack like a razor-sharp blade. His lips pressed into a tight line, his jaw quivered ever so slightly, and his eyes darkened with suppressed fury. They had no idea the man they were ridiculing was standing just a few steps away, the very man who had poured every ounce of his heart and soul into building this company from the ground up. His grip on the items in his hand tightened until his knuckles turned white, but he forced himself to remain composed. Now was not the time to reveal himself. He needed to see more. He needed to rip away the curtain hiding the full extent of this rot. Just then, Mike delivered an even crueler blow. "This company? Give it a few more weeks, and it'll be out of business. Those pets? Who cares? As long as my paycheck clears, that's all that matters." Jack's heart clenched in agony. His eyes darkened further, his chest heaving under the weight of rage barely contained. But on the surface, he maintained a thin mask of calm, even though every nerve in his body was stretched to its limit. He took a deep breath, his trembling hand slowly relaxing. Jack placed the items on the counter and checked out like any other customer, his movements steady and unhurried, as if nothing had happened. But inside his mind, every fragment of this ordeal was locking into place, forming a grim, disheartening picture. As he stepped outside, he didn't leave right away. Instead, Jack circled around to the back of the store, finding a hidden vantage point to continue observing. His heart pounded, echoing in his chest like war drums heralding an impending battle. A chilling premonition crept over him. Jack knew that far worse things were still lurking in the shadows, and he swore to himself every single truth would be dragged into the light. Every single one. Jack stood pressed against the wall outside the staff area, breathing deep and slow, trying to hold together the fragile calm that was splintering inside him. His eyes remained locked on every movement within the store, as if even a single blink would cause him to miss another dark fragment of this already fractured picture. The front door swung open, snapping Jack out of his grim thoughts. A middle-aged woman hurried inside, clutching a small dog wrapped in a thin blanket tightly in her arms. Her face was pale with worry, and her eyes shone with a fear she could no longer conceal. Jack immediately sensed something was wrong. His gaze slowly swept over the angry red rash spreading across the dog's fur. The little animal let out a weak whimper, stabbing pain deep into Jack's chest. Excuse me. The woman spoke, her voice trembling with urgency and desperation. I bought flea treatment from this store last week, but after using it, my dog had a severe allergic reaction. I need help, please. A young employee behind the counter glanced at her awkwardly. Do you have a receipt, ma'am? He asked hesitantly. The woman bit her lip, hugging the dog closer as if trying to give it warmth. I think I lost it, but I'm sure I bought it here. Please help me. From behind, Tina's voice cut through the air, cold and sharp like a knife. No receipt, no exchange or advice. That's store policy. No exceptions. Jack could see the panic rising in the woman's eyes, her hands trembling, tears welling at the corners of her eyes. It was the look of a helpless mother, watching her child suffer, yet powerless to do anything. The young employee tried to suggest a solution. We could check the purchase history through her credit card. But Tina immediately interrupted, her tone razor sharp. What's the point of wasting time? It's not our fault she didn't keep her receipt. That ruthless indifference ignited the fire of fury inside Jack. His eyes narrowed, his jaw clenched so tightly that the veins in his neck stood out. He couldn't stand it any longer. Jack stepped forward, his voice dropping to a thunderous, commanding tone. That's enough. Tina turned around, raising an eyebrow with defiance. And who are you two but into this? Without answering her, Jack gently turned to the distressed woman, his gaze softening. Come with me. I'll help you. He led her to the pet care section, carefully selecting a soothing ointment while advising her to take the dog to a veterinarian for a full examination. The woman looked at him, her tear-filled eyes glowing with deep gratitude. Thank you. Thank you for at least being someone who cares. Jack gave a small nod, his heart heavy with sorrow. As he returned to the counter, his eyes hardened as they met Tina's. You turned your back on a desperate customer without even trying to help. Do you really think that's acceptable? Tina shrugged, her tone insolent. Not my problem. Jack clenched his fists, his eyes burning with resolve. Within him, his rage had crystallized into the cold steel of a man preparing for an uncompromising battle. He left the store in silence, but inside him, a storm was raging fiercer than ever. Jack knew one thing for certain. This apathy and cruelty had to end, and it had to end now. After leaving the first store, Jack's mind was still reeling from the coldness and apathy he had just witnessed. Each step he took along the sidewalk felt heavy, as if he were carrying the weight of all the forgotten little souls suffering within the company he had once loved so dearly. But Jack knew one thing for certain. To see the full picture, he couldn't stop at just one place. He needed to go deeper, to reach the very core of the cracks spreading throughout his empire. The car came to a stop in front of the second store on his inspection list. From the outside, it looked more promising than the first. The storefront was clean, the signage bright and clear, and the potted plants flanking the entrance were lush and healthy. For a moment, Jack felt a flicker of hope. Stepping inside, he immediately noticed that the atmosphere felt different. Employees were busily stocking shelves, smiling as they greeted customers. An older manager, wearing a name tag that read Frank, was helping an elderly woman choose dog food, his expression warm, his eyes sincere. Maybe this place is better, Jack thought, though he kept his guard up, because the most insidious cracks are often hidden beneath the polished surface. He picked up a bag of premium cat food and approached a young red-haired employee. "Is this suitable for senior cats?" Jack asked, his eyes quietly studying every nuance of her expression. The young woman offered a professional smile. "Yes, sir. It's excellent. It has added nutrients for joint and digestive health." Jack nodded, then lowered his voice as if making casual conversation. "Do you like working here?" Her smile faltered just slightly, her gaze flickering away for the briefest moment before she answered. "I do, when the main manager is on shift. But when the assistant manager is in charge, it's a different story." Jack narrowed his eyes. "How different?" She glanced around cautiously, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "He plays favorites. If he doesn't like you, your shift becomes a nightmare. Some people have already quit because they just couldn't take it anymore." Jack's heart sank. He quietly absorbed every word. The cracks weren't just at the front line. They had crept deep into the management ranks. The problem was far bigger than he had imagined. His eyes drifted toward the checkout counter, where an employee was carefully helping a customer review the return policy. Though the atmosphere here wasn't as oppressive as the first store, Jack could feel it. The subtle undercurrent of anxiety, the cautious glances exchanged between staff. They're living in fear, Jack realized, not because of the job itself, but because of leaders who don't deserve their positions. He clenched his fists, not out of anger this time, but from a fierce, unshakable resolve. "I can't just clean the surface. I need to cut out the rot at its very roots." As he left the store, Jack turned back for one final look. In his eyes now was not just disappointment, but the simmering fire of a revolution waiting to ignite. There were still more stores ahead, and Jack knew the truth wouldn't end there, and neither would he. The next morning, the sky hung gray and heavy, as if foreshadowing the storm to come. But within Jack Miller, that storm had been raging for a long time, and today it was about to erupt. The largest conference room at company headquarters had been meticulously prepared. Jack sat at the center of the room, his hands interlaced, his piercing gaze sweeping across the tense faces before him. Ben, his loyal assistant, stood silently at his side, casting a worried glance toward his boss. Around the long table, senior managers and regional supervisors gathered one by one. Some tried to maintain a facade of confidence, while others couldn't hide their growing unease. They knew Jack had gone undercover. However, none of them could have anticipated what their CEO had witnessed firsthand. Jack spoke, his voice low yet resonant with undeniable authority. "I am not sitting here today as a CEO reading reports like I usually do. I am sitting here as a man who walked into our stores as an ordinary customer, and what I saw is utterly unacceptable." The air in the room thickened. Some managers exchanged uneasy glances, their faces draining of color. Jack continued, his cold, steely eyes locking onto each person in the room. "At one store, I saw employees showing complete disregard for the tiny lives gasping for water in their cages. I saw customers left stranded, pleading for help, met only with cold, heartless indifference. Worse yet, I personally heard vicious insults, aimed at me and at the very company you all work for." A wave of tension rippled through the room. Some managers lowered their heads. Others took deep breaths, struggling to remain composed. Ben, standing behind Jack, gripped his folder tightly, as if trying to channel his strength into his boss. Jack paused briefly, then declared with sharp resolve, "Tina and Mike from the first store terminated immediately. No paperwork, no excuses. They have betrayed the very values this company was built upon." Ben nodded, swiftly noting it down. A few managers exhaled as if justice had finally been served. And Frank, the shift manager at the second store, Jack's gaze locked onto a man sweating profusely, "will undergo an internal investigation. I will personally interview his team to get to the bottom of these accusations of favoritism and abuse of power." Murmurs rippled across the room, but Jack raised his hand, silencing the chatter with absolute authority. We will no longer tolerate complacency, silent complicity, or rotten power plays. I am launching a full-scale reform. All mid-level managers will be required to undergo retraining on professional ethics and leadership responsibility. Surprise inspections will be conducted regularly, without notice. Most importantly, I am opening a direct feedback line from frontline employees straight to my office. No one will ever silence the truth again. The room seemed to explode with tension. Some faces visibly paled, the once powerful figures who had hidden behind layers of authority now trembling in their seats. But amid the shadows of fear, there were also faces that lit up, the ones who had quietly held onto their integrity, now seeing a glimmer of hope. Jack rose to his feet, his eyes sharp as a blade freshly drawn from its sheath. We have let this rot spread too far. But starting today, we will not just clean the surface, we will clean it to the very roots. The room fell into a profound silence, as if they had just heard the rallying cry of a revolution. In every heart, whether gripped by fear or sparked by hope, they knew one thing for certain. A new era had begun. With firm, unshakable steps and the steel determination of a man forged in fire, Jack walked out of the conference room, ready to face the next chapter in the battle for the soul of his empire. Less than 24 hours after the explosive meeting at headquarters, Jack Miller returned to the very place where it had all begun. The first store where apathy and negligence had once left him heartbroken. But this time he needed no disguise. As he stepped through the glass doors, Jack immediately felt the tension in the air. The store itself remained unchanged, but the atmosphere was tight as a drawn bowstring. Eyes darted toward him, then quickly away. The employees moved awkwardly, their motions stiff with anxiety. They knew exactly who had just walked in. Tina and Mike, the ones who had spread the rot, were no longer there. News of the morning's conference had spread like wildfire. Jack's breaths were slower now, but deeper. He could feel every beat of his heart, not from fear, but from a surge of unshakable resolve. His gaze swept the room until it settled on Emily. The young woman was diligently restocking the shelves, her focus intense, though her hands trembled slightly as she sensed his presence. Her face paled for a moment, lips pressed tightly together as if to steady herself. When their eyes met, Emily quickly lowered her head, gripping the edge of the shelf to compose herself. Jack walked toward her, each step steady and firm, like the beating drums of an army marching into battle. He stopped in front of Emily, and a gentle, genuine smile softened his features, easing some of the tension in her eyes. "Emily," he began, his voice deep and warm, carrying clear and steady through the silence. "I saw how you acted when everyone else ignored their responsibilities. You didn't just do your job, you kept your integrity alive in this toxic environment." Emily looked up at him, her eyes glistening with surprise and quiet emotion. There was a brief hesitation before she found the courage to speak. I was just trying to do the right thing, sir." Jack nodded, his gaze locking onto hers, as if to tell her he saw and understood every silent sacrifice she had made. "That's why," he declared, "I've decided to promote you. From today onward, you are the shift manager. Help me change this place, Emily." Her mouth fell open, her eyes widening as tears welled up in disbelief. Jack's words pierced straight to her heart. Emily clasped her hands together tightly, her breath quickening, her cheeks flushed with overwhelming emotion. "Thank you, sir. I'll do my very best. I promise." The air in the store thickened for a moment as all eyes turned toward Emily. Those who had grown accustomed to chaos and resignation now watched her with a mix of admiration, envy, and for the first time, a flicker of hope. Jack turned, facing the entire staff. His eyes swept across them, reading the unease in their nervous gulps, the anticipation in their restless eyes. When he spoke, his voice was strong and resolute, as if stamping an unbreakable seal on a new beginning. "Everything is going to change. You will either rise with us to rebuild this store, or you will step aside from this journey. I will no longer tolerate laziness, apathy, or indifference. Not here." Not anywhere in this company. His words landed like hammer blows in their minds. A heavy silence followed, but Jack saw it. The flickering transformation in their eyes. From fear to awareness, from hesitation to determination. Emily, gathering her courage, stepped up beside Jack. She turned to face her colleagues, her voice quivering at first, but soon growing steadier. We have a chance to start over. I will give it my all, and I hope you will too. We're not just working for a job. We're working for the lives of the little creatures we care for every day and for ourselves. The eyes that once avoided meeting hers now slowly shifted into nods of agreement. A small but powerful wave of hope began to ripple through the store. A young employee who had been quietly observing whispered to a colleague, "Maybe this time, things will really be different." Jack stood there, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew the spark of change had been lit in these people. And as he turned to leave the store, he no longer felt alone in his mission for reform. The heavy atmosphere that once choked this place had been brightened by a new ray of hope. And in Jack's mind, the fire of determination blazed brighter than ever. This battle, he would win it no matter what. After leaving the first store, Jack Miller didn't return to headquarters right away. A powerful thought tugged at him. He needed to see for himself the store once praised as the company's model branch. Not just for comfort, but to truly understand what made the difference. The car rolled to a stop at the third store, the one that, according to every report, consistently received the most positive feedback. The moment Jack stepped inside, he could feel it, the unmistakable difference. The air was fresh, warm greetings rang out as employees welcomed each customer. His heart, heavy for so long, felt just a bit lighter. Step by step, Jack moved through the store, observing the eyes of the employees here. There was no fear, no suffocating tension, only confidence, responsibility, and a quiet pride that shone in their faces. A young employee was attentively helping an elderly customer choose the right food for her aging dog. Her detailed explanations, her focused listening, and her genuine smile made Jack smile in return. This was exactly what he had longed to see in every one of his stores. In the far corner, he noticed a middle-aged woman reviewing inventory reports. Her name tag read, Laura, store manager. Jack approached. Laura looked up, surprise flashing across her face for a brief moment, but she quickly composed herself. "Good day, Mr. Miller," Laura greeted him, her tone confident yet respectful. "We didn't expect you to visit today." Jack returned a gentle smile, though his gaze was serious. "Laura, I'd like to know your secret. What makes this place so different?" Without hesitation, Laura set her documents aside and answered frankly, "We set clear expectations from day one, sir. Everyone here knows exactly what's expected of them, and we don't hesitate to address mistakes. But more importantly, we treat our employees as people, not tools. We recognize every effort, no matter how small. When they feel respected and appreciated, they give their very best." Jack nodded, genuine admiration flickering in his eyes. "Would you be willing to share this approach with the other managers? I want every store to reach the standard you've set here." Laura didn't hesitate. "Of course, sir. If it helps make the company better, I'd be honored." At that moment, Jack saw the full picture. He had witnessed the darkness, and now he saw the light. And this light would be the flame to guide his company's rebirth. Back at headquarters, Jack immediately set about rebuilding the foundation of his empire. He launched a series of leadership training programs, with Laura leading the charge to inspire others. Surprise inspections were implemented, and most importantly, a dedicated internal hotline was established, allowing every frontline employee to speak up without fear of retaliation. During a company-wide meeting, Jack stood before his entire workforce, his gaze sweeping over the attentive faces before him. His voice rang out, rich with emotion. "We once lost our way. We allowed apathy and indifference to cloud our core values. But starting today, we begin a new chapter, a chapter of integrity, responsibility, and mutual respect. Not just to save this company, but to make it a place we can all be proud of." The hall erupted in thunderous applause. In the eyes of every person present, from new hires to senior managers, a new spark had been lit. Hope. And as Jack stepped down from the podium, a soft smile spread across his face. It wasn't the smile of pride, but the smile of a man who knew that, no matter how long and challenging the road ahead, he had reclaimed the most precious thing of all, trust. As Jack Miller stood before his entire company and declared a new chapter for his empire, the room erupted in thunderous applause. But in that very moment, he understood something deeply. True change doesn't start with policies, it begins in the hearts of people. Jack had walked into the darkest corners of his own company, dared to confront the raw, uncomfortable truth, and from there, ignited a fire so powerful that no force could ever extinguish it. He taught us a lesson we must never forget. Silence in the face of wrongdoing is complicity. But when you dare to confront it, you have the power to transform an entire empire. Now, I turn this question to you. If it were you, standing in front of injustice, would you look the other way? Or would you rise, just like Jack Miller did? Tell us in the comments. Share your thoughts and feelings about this story. We would love to hear from you. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Toch Story, where we bring you stories that touch your heart and inspire you to become the very best version of yourself. Because change starts with each of us. And Jack Miller's story could one day become your story too. The lesson. You see, Jack Miller's story isn't just about a company on the verge of collapse. It's a profound reminder that sometimes what destroys us isn't the great storms outside, but the small toxic winds that creep in from within, apathy, resignation, and the fear of facing the truth. But Jack refused to look away. He stepped straight into the darkness, into places no report dared to touch. And in that very darkness, he found a fragile light. A young woman named Emily, whose kindness and sense of duty became the spark that reignited an entire weary team. That story makes me believe this. In any system, whether it's a company, a family, or society at large, when one person stands up for what is right, that spark will spread. Change does not demand that you be a CEO. It doesn't require you to hold power in your hands. It begins with the simple courage to not turn away from what is wrong. So what about you? When you see injustice, will you stay silent to avoid trouble, or will you be the one to spark the fire of change? If today's story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Leave your thoughts in the comments, because perhaps your words might inspire someone out there who needs to hear this message. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Toch Story, so you never miss the next story that will touch your soul, because stories that move the heart are stories worth spreading. See you on the next journey.